The last thing my husband said before I walked out of his family's reunion was, "You have two options, Diane, apologize or leave." So I left. I wish I could tell you I walked out with my head held high and a perfectly clear plan. I didn't. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my car keys twice before I reached the parking lot. It was Saturday afternoon in Bloomington, Indiana, and the family reunion was being held at Griffey Lake. The picnic tables were crowded with paper plates, potato salad, baked beans, and the peach cobbler I had gotten up at 6 that morning to make. I had been married to Rob for 31 years, long enough to know when his family was annoyed with me, long enough to know when I was expected to smile, keep quiet, and let things roll off my back. Usually I did. That afternoon I couldn't. It started with Linda, Rob's younger sister. She was sitting across from me, picking at a paper plate with a plastic fork while talking about their mother's house. "You know, Mom needs someone to start handling things," she said. "She's getting older. Their mother, Evelyn, was 85. She was still sharp, still living in her own home, and still drove her Buick to the grocery store twice a week. I said Mom can decide what she wants." Linda looked at me. "I wasn't talking to you, Diane." I set my fork down. "Then who were you talking to?" She smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. Family. That one word sat there between us. I looked around the table. Rob was talking to his brother Gary. Evelyn was sitting beside the birthday cake, listening quietly. I could have let it go. I almost did. Then Linda said, "Some people marry into a family and suddenly think they have a say in everything." Gary laughed. I didn't. For years I had tried to keep peace with Linda and Gary. I brought food to gatherings, I remembered birthdays. I drove Evelyn to doctor appointments when Rob was working. I paid bills when she was recovering from surgery. Nobody had ever asked me to do those things. I simply did them because that was what family did. But apparently I wasn't family. I looked at Linda. "If you're talking about me, just say it." She shrugged. "Well, you do seem very interested in Mom's money." I actually laughed because I couldn't believe what I'd heard. "Linda, I have never asked your mother for a dime. That's not what I heard." I looked at Rob. He was still sitting there, still eating, still saying nothing. That hurt more than Linda's accusation. I said, "Do you know who paid Mom's homeowner's insurance last year?" Nobody answered. I did. Linda frowned. "And the electric bill when she was sick, I did." Gary leaned back. "Well, nobody asked you to." "No," I said. "They didn't." My voice was getting louder now, and I knew it. But somebody had to do it. Linda crossed her arms. "You always have to make yourself the hero." That was when something inside me finally snapped. I don't want to be the hero. I wanted your mother to have heat. The table went quiet. Even the kids playing near the lake seemed suddenly far away. Linda looked at Rob. "Are you going to let her talk to me like that?" I waited for him to say something. Anything. Instead, Rob wiped his mouth with a napkin and looked at me. "Diane, you need to apologize." I stared at him. "For what? For making a scene." I looked around the table again. Nobody met my eyes. Then Rob said the sentence that changed everything. "You have two options, apologize or leave." I thought he was bluffing. After 31 years, I honestly believed he would soften. He didn't. I picked up my purse. "All right." Linda looked surprised. Rob's face changed slightly. "Diane, don't be dramatic." "I'm not." I stood. "I'm leaving." Nobody tried to stop me. Not Rob, not Linda, not Gary, not even Evelyn. I walked to my car, sat behind the steering wheel, and closed the door. For several minutes I just stared through the windshield. I could still smell peach cobbler on my clothes. I could hear the lake water moving against the shore, and I kept thinking about one thing. He told me to leave. So I did. But I didn't drive home. I was too angry to walk into that house and pretend everything was normal. Instead, I drove to a Hampton Inn in Bloomington. I checked in around 7 that evening with one small overnight bag I'd grabbed from the car. The woman at the front desk smiled. Just one night I hesitated. I don't know yet. She didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. Upstairs, I took off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed. Rob. I watched his name on the screen until it stopped. A minute later, another message appeared. "Are you coming home tomorrow?" I stared at it. That was it. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry," not, "We need to talk," just, "Are you coming home tomorrow?" Tomorrow I put the phone face down. Then I opened my laptop. I wasn't planning a revenge scheme. I wasn't even thinking clearly. I just knew I needed somewhere else to go. I searched flights out of Indianapolis, Nashville, one way. The price wasn't terrible. My finger hovered over the screen. I thought about Rob. I thought about our house. I thought about 31 years of marriage and all the times I had swallowed my pride to keep peace. Then I thought about that picnic table. About everyone watching me. About my own husband telling me I had to apologize or leave. I clicked purchase. The confirmation appeared on the screen. Indianapolis to Nashville. One way. The room suddenly felt very quiet. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I only knew I wasn't going back the next morning. Not yet. And for the first time in a very long time, the next decision was mine. The next morning I woke up before the alarm. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then I saw the beige curtains, the unfamiliar lamp beside the bed, and the Hampton Inn notepad on the nightstand. I reached for my phone. There were 3 messages from Rob. "Where are you? Are you seriously doing this? Call me?" I stared at the screen while the coffee maker in the corner of the room started making that familiar little bubbling sound. I almost called him. That was the embarrassing part. After everything that had happened, some part of me still wanted my husband to say the right thing. I wanted him to call and say, "Diane, I was wrong. Come home." But my phone stayed silent after that. No apology came. I got dressed, went downstairs, and poured myself a cup of coffee from the hotel machine. A man in a blue polo shirt was standing near the waffle maker with his grandson. The boy was laughing because his waffle came out looking like a map. I smiled at them. It was the first smile I'd had since the reunion. After breakfast, I drove back toward Indianapolis. My flight wasn't until late afternoon. I had plenty of time. When I got home, Rob's truck was in the driveway. I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes before going inside. The house looked exactly as I had left it. My cardigan was hanging over the back of the kitchen chair. The mail was stacked beside the toaster. There was a grocery receipt on the counter from Kroger. Ordinary things. That almost made it worse. Rob was sitting in the living room watching television. He muted it when I walked in. "So you're back." I put my purse down. "I'm getting some things." He frowned. "Where are you going, Nashville? For how long, I don't know." He stood up. "Diane, this is ridiculous." I looked at him. "You told me to leave. I didn't mean leave the marriage. You said apologize or leave." I was angry. So was I. He rubbed his forehead. "Your behavior yesterday was unacceptable." I almost laughed. "That's what you want to talk about." "What else is there?" I looked at the man I had been married to for 31 years. There were gray hairs around his temples now. The same hands that had held mine at our daughter's wedding were resting on his hips. I wanted to recognize him, but I couldn't. "I need some space," I said. He shook his head. "You're making this bigger than it is." That sentence settled something inside me. I went upstairs. I packed 2 pairs of jeans, some blouses, underwear, toiletries, my prescription glasses, and the small photo album my mother had given me years ago. I left most of my clothes. I wasn't thinking about moving permanently. I was just getting away. At 2:10 p.m., I drove to Indianapolis International Airport. I checked 1 suitcase and carried a small handbag through security. At the gate, I sat beside an older couple who were arguing quietly about whether they had packed enough socks. The woman noticed my suitcase. "Going somewhere warm, Tennessee," she smiled. "Vacation?" I hesitated. Something like that. I boarded the plane at 4:35. When the flight attendant closed the overhead bins, I looked out the window. I expected to feel brave. Instead, I felt sick. What if I had made a terrible mistake? What if Rob filed for divorce? What if I couldn't afford to live alone? What if 31 years of marriage really could disappear in one weekend? By the time we landed in Nashville, I had asked myself those questions at least 20 times. I checked into a modest hotel in Murfreesboro. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was worn near the elevator and the air conditioner rattled every time it kicked on. But nobody there knew my name. Nobody expected anything from me. The next morning I sat at a little table near the lobby window with a cup of coffee and my laptop. I opened my bank account. After the flight, hotel rental car, and deposit for a small furnished apartment, I had just under $1,800 available. That number scared me. I had never been reckless with money. I called a local property manager and found a tiny furnished apartment that was available the following week. The rent was higher than I wanted, but I could manage it if I found work, so I started looking. By lunchtime, I had submitted 4 applications. One was for a receptionist position at a medical supply company in Murfreesboro. The next afternoon they called me. "Ms. Parker, we'd like to meet you." I almost cried after hanging up, not because it was some dream job. It wasn't. It was a desk, a phone, paperwork, and health insurance. But it was mine. That evening, Rob called. I answered. "Where are you, Tennessee?" There was a long pause. "You actually left Indiana." "You told me to. I thought you'd cool off." "I did. And I still don't want to come home." His voice became quieter. "Diane, this is your home." I looked around the hotel room. "I know." "Then why are you doing this?" I didn't have a perfect answer. Because I was hurt. Because I was angry. Because I needed to know who I was without constantly worrying about whether his family approved of me. Finally, I said, "Because I don't want to spend another 30 years earning the right to sit at your family's table." He didn't answer. I ended the call. For the next few days, I built a strange little routine. Coffee at 7, job interviews, apartment hunting, grocery shopping at Publix, laundry in a hotel machine, calling my daughter who lived 3 states away and had no idea what had happened. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. Then on Thursday afternoon, something happened that changed the entire situation. I was sitting in my rental car outside the apartment complex when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Evelyn's name. I answered. "Hello." There was silence. Then I heard her breathing. "Diane Evelyn." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Please don't hang up, I won't. I need you to listen to me." I sat up straight. "What happened?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Linda brought a lawyer to my house." My stomach tightened. "What she says I need to sign some papers." "What kind of papers? I don't know." "Did you sign anything?" "No." I closed my eyes. Good. Evelyn started crying. Then she said something that made my entire body go cold. She says it's for my protection. "But Diane, I think she wants my house." I looked through the windshield at the quiet apartment complex. A week earlier, I had thought my biggest problem was a family argument. Now I realized something much bigger had been happening while I was trying to keep everyone happy. And suddenly, I understood why Linda had been so determined to make me look like the problem. I didn't sleep much that night. Evelyn's words kept running through my mind. I think she wants my house. At 6 the next morning, I was already sitting at the small kitchen table in my apartment, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I had a choice. I could stay in Tennessee and tell myself this wasn't my problem anymore, or I could go back to Indiana and find out what was really happening. The easy answer was to stay away. The right answer wasn't so simple. I called Evelyn first. She answered on the second ring. "Diane, I'm here." Her voice sounded tired. "I'm sorry I called you. Don't be. I know you and Rob are having problems. We are, and I don't want to make things worse." I looked out the window. "You're not making things worse. Linda is." Evelyn sighed. "I don't know what to do. Don't sign anything." "I haven't." "Good. And don't let anyone rush you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She told me you weren't coming back." I didn't answer. "She said you abandoned Rob." That stung, even though I knew Linda would say something like that. "Did Rob say that?" "No." "Then who told you, Linda?" "Of course." I spent the morning making calls. The first was to Susan Miller, an old friend from Indianapolis. Susan had worked as an accountant before retiring a few years earlier. She knew numbers the way some people knew baseball statistics. When I told her what had happened, she didn't gasp or tell me I was being dramatic. She simply asked, "Do you have records of the money you've paid for Evelyn?" "Yes." "How far back?" "I don't know. Maybe 2 years." "Find everything." I pulled out my laptop. For the next 3 hours, I went through bank statements, credit card bills, pharmacy receipts, insurance payments, and old emails. Susan was right. There was more than I remembered. Homeowner's insurance, electric bills, a plumbing repair, 2 prescription copays, a new water heater, even groceries. I had never thought of those payments as important. They were just things that needed to be handled. Susan called me that afternoon. "You need to come home." I frowned. "I thought you were going to tell me to stay away." "I would have if this was only a family argument." "What changed the paperwork?" I waited. Susan said Diane Linda may be trying to get control of Evelyn's property. My stomach tightened. "Are you sure?" "No, that's why you need a lawyer to look at it." "I'm an accountant, not an attorney." She gave me the name of an attorney in Bloomington. I called the office. The receptionist squeezed me in for the following Monday. That evening, I bought our ticket back to Indianapolis. I hated that I had to go back. It felt like surrender. But I kept reminding myself that returning to Indiana didn't mean returning to Rob. On Monday morning, I met the attorney. Her name was Karen Whitaker. She was in her early 60s, wore simple glasses, and had the calm manner of someone who had spent decades listening to people explain complicated family problems. I showed her the documents Evelyn had sent me. Karen read them carefully. "These documents concern control over your mother-in-law's affairs," she said. "Is that legal?" "It depends on what she is signing, and whether she understands it." Linda brought the lawyer. "That doesn't automatically mean anything improper happened." I nodded. "I don't want to accuse anyone without proof." Karen smiled slightly. "That's a good instinct." Then she looked at my financial records. "These payments are yours?" "Yes." "All of them, as far as I can tell." She flipped through several pages. "You've paid a substantial amount. I wasn't keeping score. I understand." She put the papers down. "Unfortunately, families often start keeping score after the money is gone." That sentence stayed with me. After the appointment, I drove to my old house. Rob's truck was parked in the driveway. I almost turned around. Instead, I walked inside. He was in the kitchen. He looked surprised. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I didn't think I needed permission." He stared at me. "Are you staying?" "No." His shoulders dropped. "What do you want?" "I want some of my things." "You took half the house with you." I looked at the small suitcase sitting upstairs in my memory. "I took clothes." He didn't respond. Then he said, "Mom's situation is getting complicated. I know. Linda is trying to help." "That's not what Mom said." He frowned. "You've always had a problem with Linda." "No, Linda has always had a problem with me." He walked away. I went upstairs. In our bedroom, I opened the closet and pulled out an old plastic storage box. Inside were tax returns, insurance documents, old bank statements, and receipts. I started sorting them. That's when I found the envelope. It was tucked behind a stack of old tax papers. My name wasn't on it. Neither was Evelyn's. On the front, in Rob's handwriting, were 5 words: "Important, do not let Diane see this." I sat down on the floor. For a moment, I didn't open it. I actually considered putting it back. Whatever was inside had been intentionally hidden from me. That alone told me enough. Finally, I opened it. The first page was a handwritten list. Linda's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. At the top was a list of Evelyn's belongings: the silverware, the dining room table, the television, a set of antique lamps, a bedroom dresser, then the house. Next to each item were names. Linda had apparently decided who would receive what. I read the list twice. Then I noticed something. My name wasn't anywhere, not even beside an old coffee maker. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that comes out when something is so absurd you don't know what else to do. I took a picture of the list with my phone. Then I put the papers back exactly where I'd found them. When I came downstairs, Rob was sitting at the kitchen table. "What are you doing?" he asked. Going home. His expression changed. This is your home. I looked at him. Not anymore. He shook his head. You're making a mistake. Maybe I was. But for the first time I wasn't afraid of making a decision that disappointed somebody else. Before I left, I looked at him. Rob, I want to ask you something. What did you know about Linda's list? His face went still. That was all the answer I needed. I walked out. That evening I met Karen again. I showed her the photograph. She studied it. Keep this. I will. And don't confront Linda yet. Why? Because right now you have something more valuable than anger. What documentation? I nodded. On the drive home, I thought about that picnic table at Griffey Lake. The people who had watched me leave. The people who thought I would eventually come crawling back. They had no idea what I had found. And I wasn't going to threaten them. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't even going to tell them what I knew. Not yet. Because sometimes the best thing you can do when people underestimate you is let them keep underestimating you. By the time the next family gathering was announced, I had stopped asking myself whether I should go. I knew I would. Not because I wanted another argument with Linda, not because I wanted to embarrass Rob, and certainly not because I expected anyone to apologize. I was going because Evelyn had asked me to come. The gathering was being held at a community hall just outside Bloomington, the kind of place with folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee no matter what time of day it was. The invitation came from Linda. She called it a family meeting. I called it something else in my head. A test. For 3 weeks I had stayed quiet. I worked part-time at the medical supply company in Murfreesboro whenever I was in Tennessee. I had moved into my small apartment near Franklin where the kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people to stand in at once. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. I had a little routine now. Coffee at 7, work by 8, a short walk in the evening if the weather wasn't too hot. On Saturdays I'd drive to the grocery store and take my time instead of rushing through the aisles because someone was waiting for me. I was getting used to my own company. That surprised me. I had spent most of my adult life being somebody's wife, somebody's daughter-in-law, somebody's mother. Now I was just Diane, and I was beginning to like her. Still, there were nights when I missed Rob. That was the truth. I missed the man he had been when we were younger. I missed Sunday mornings when we'd sit on the porch with coffee. I missed the little things, the sound of his truck pulling into the driveway, his habit of leaving the kitchen cabinet door open, the way he'd fall asleep halfway through a movie and deny it when I woke him. Marriage doesn't disappear just because something breaks. The memories stay. That's what makes leaving so difficult. On the morning of the meeting, I drove from Tennessee to Indiana. I stopped twice, once for gas, once at a Cracker Barrel outside Louisville because I was hungry and didn't feel like eating in the car. I arrived at the community hall around 1:40 p.m. Linda's car was already there, so was Rob's. I sat in my car for a minute. Then I took a breath and walked inside. Evelyn saw me first. Her face softened. Diane. She stood and hugged me. I hugged her back. You look tired, I whispered. So do you. That made me smile. Linda walked over. I'm glad you came. Her voice was polite. Too polite. I said I would. She looked at the folder in my hand. What is that paperwork? Her smile disappeared. Rob came over. Can we talk privately? Later. His jaw tightened. I found a chair near Evelyn and sat down. There were 12 people in the room. Aunts, cousins, 2 family friends. Everyone had apparently been told that Diane Parker had caused a problem and abandoned her husband. I could see it in their faces. Linda stood at the front. We're here because this family has been under a lot of stress. I almost smiled. That was one way to describe it. She looked directly at me. Diane's actions have hurt Rob and Mom. I said nothing. Linda continued. She left without discussing anything with the family. I kept my hands folded. She made accusations about money. Still nothing. Then Gary spoke. You've always been controlling about Mom's finances. I looked at him. Really? Yes. Then I have a question. He crossed his arms. Who paid Mom's homeowner's insurance last year? He didn't answer. I opened my folder. Who paid the electric bill for 6 months while she was recovering silence? Who paid the pharmacy? Linda interrupted. This isn't necessary. I looked at her. I think it is. I placed the first statement on the table, then another. Then another. The room became quiet. These are copies of the payments I made for Evelyn's household expenses. Linda picked one up. So what? So, nothing, I said. I didn't bring these here to demand repayment. Gary looked uncomfortable. Then why bring them? Because you said I was interested in your mother's money. I looked around the room. I wasn't. I placed another stack on the table. I was spending mine. Nobody spoke. Then Linda said, "You can't prove that Mom didn't reimburse you." Evelyn answered from across the room. I didn't. Linda turned. Mom. I didn't, Evelyn repeated. Her voice was stronger this time. I never asked Diane to pay those bills. I looked at her. She nodded at me. I knew. Linda sat down. Then I pulled out another document. This is what your lawyer brought to Evelyn's house. Linda's face changed. Rob looked at me. Diane, don't. I ignored him. I asked an attorney to review it. Linda stood. You had no right. I had every right to make sure Evelyn understood what she was being asked to sign. Gary looked at the document. What does it do? Karen had explained it to me carefully. I explained it the same way. It would give Linda significant authority over Mom's financial affairs. Linda shook her head. That is not what it says. Evelyn spoke. That's what you told me it was. Linda turned toward her. Mom, you don't understand. I understand enough. That was when I noticed Rob. He was staring at the floor. I looked at him. Rob. He looked up. You knew. His eyes filled with frustration. I knew Linda was trying to help Mom. You knew about the papers, yes. You knew she brought a lawyer, yes. And you didn't tell me he rubbed his face. I didn't think it was your business. I nodded slowly. That hurt. But it didn't surprise me anymore. Then Linda said something that changed the entire room. You're acting like you sacrificed everything for this family. I looked at her. No. I reached into my folder. I didn't sacrifice everything. I put down our old financial statements. I contributed. She stared at the papers. These are our joint accounts, Rob said. Yes. And I looked at him. You told your family I never contributed financially. Rob's face went pale. Linda looked at him. You said that he didn't answer. I continued. For years you told people I was dependent on you. Gary looked uncomfortable. Linda said Rob never said that. I opened another document. Then maybe you should ask him. Nobody spoke. I could hear the old wall clock ticking above the kitchen doorway. Then Evelyn said quietly, Diane, you don't have to prove yourself anymore. I looked at her. And for some reason, those words nearly broke me. Because that was exactly what I had been doing for 31 years. Proving myself. Proving I was good enough. Helpful enough. Patient enough. Quiet enough. I closed the folder. I agree. Rob stood. Diane, please. I looked at him. What can we talk? Not here. Then come home. The room went silent. I shook my head. I didn't come here to come home. His expression changed. Then why did you come? I looked around the room. Because you all deserved the truth. I picked up my purse, and now you have it. As I walked toward the door, Linda called after me. You think you've won? I stopped. I turned around. No. I smiled slightly. I think I finally stopped playing. Then I walked out. For the first time in months, I drove away from a family gathering without wondering whether I had said too much. I had said enough. The drive back to Tennessee was long, and somewhere south of Louisville, I stopped at a gas station for coffee and a sandwich. I sat in the car and watched trucks roll past on the interstate. My phone was on the passenger seat. There were 6 missed calls from Rob. I didn't call back. Not because I hated him. I didn't. That was the complicated part. I still loved the man I had married. I just wasn't sure I could keep loving him the way I had been expected to. For 31 years, I had believed marriage meant standing beside your spouse no matter what. I still believed that. But I had finally learned something I should have understood much earlier. Standing beside someone didn't mean standing beneath them. When I got back to Tennessee, I went to work Monday morning. My supervisor, Carol, looked at me when I walked in. "You all right?" I smiled. "I'm getting there." She nodded. She didn't ask anything else. I appreciated that. At lunch, I sat outside behind the building with a turkey sandwich and a bottle of water. My phone rang. Rob, this time I answered. "Hello. Are you home?" "No, I mean Tennessee." "Yes." He was quiet. Then he said, "I talked to Mom." "How is she?" "She's upset, so am I." "I know." I waited. Then he said, "I shouldn't have told you to leave." I closed my eyes. There it was. The apology I had wanted weeks earlier. It didn't feel the way I had imagined. Maybe because too much had happened since then. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "I want you to come home." I looked through the window of the office building. A woman was watering a plant near the reception desk. Everything around me looked ordinary. "I don't think I can." "Why?" "Because I don't trust you anymore." He sighed. "Diane, I made one mistake." "No." My voice was quiet. You made a choice." He didn't answer. "You chose your family when I needed my husband. I was trying to keep peace. So was I." He sighed again. "I know." We stayed silent. Then I asked him the question I had been carrying around for weeks. "If you had to choose again, would you still tell me to apologize or leave nothing? Not a word?" I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Finally he said, "I don't know." And there it was, the answer, not the one I wanted, but the honest one. "I do," I said. "What I know, what I'd choose." He didn't ask. I think he understood. We ended the call without saying goodbye. That evening I stopped at Publix on the way home. I bought chicken, lettuce, tomatoes, coffee, and a small piece of lemon cake from the bakery. Nothing special. But as I carried the groceries upstairs, I realized something. I wasn't crying. I wasn't checking my phone every 2 minutes. I wasn't waiting for somebody to tell me what I should do. I was simply living. The divorce took several months. There were forms, phone calls, attorney appointments, arguments over furniture that weren't really about furniture. Rob wanted the dining room table. I wanted the old rocking chair my mother had given me. We eventually agreed. He kept the table. I kept the chair. It seemed strangely appropriate. The table had always been where everyone expected me to sit quietly. The chair was where my mother had taught me that being alone wasn't the same thing as being lonely. The day the divorce became final, I drove home from the courthouse and stopped at a little coffee shop in Franklin. I ordered a regular coffee and sat near the window. For the first time, I didn't have to think about what came next. There was no husband waiting, no family gathering, no holiday dinner. No need to explain myself, just a quiet afternoon. My phone rang. "Evelyn," I answered. "Hi, it's official, yes." She sighed. "I'm sorry. I know. I wish things had been different." "So do I." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Diane, yes, you were the only person who ever helped me without asking what you would get back." I looked down at my coffee. "I didn't do it for anything. I know." That was all she said. We talked for another 10 minutes. She told me about her garden. I told her about the apartment. Neither of us mentioned Linda. Neither of us needed to. Before hanging up, Evelyn said, "I hope you're happy." I smiled. "I think I'm learning how." That was the truth. My life wasn't suddenly perfect. There were lonely evenings. There were bills. There were days when I missed having someone beside me at dinner. Sometimes I still woke up thinking I needed to make enough coffee for 2 people. Then I would remember. I was allowed to make only what I wanted. It sounds like a small thing. It wasn't. A few months later, I moved into a small rental outside Franklin. It had a little porch with 2 chairs. I bought a cheap wooden planter and filled it with herbs. Every Saturday morning, I walked to a nearby coffee shop. Sometimes I brought a book. Sometimes I just sat there. Nobody knew my history. Nobody knew about the family reunion. Nobody knew about Linda, and I didn't have to explain any of it. One morning I caught my reflection in the window. I looked older than I had a year before. But I also looked lighter. I thought about that one-way ticket. At the time it had felt like a desperate decision. Now I saw it differently. It wasn't a ticket away from my marriage. It was the first ticket I had ever bought entirely for myself. I never planned to hurt Rob. I never set out to destroy Linda. I didn't need some dramatic revenge where everybody lost everything. The truth had been enough. Records had been enough. And walking away had been enough. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was accepting that I couldn't force people to value what I had spent 31 years giving them. That realization hurt. But it also gave me freedom. If you've ever been told to stay quiet just to keep the peace, I hope this story reminds you that your peace matters too. And if something in Diane's story stayed with you, stay with me for the next one. Sometimes, the life we think we're losing is simply making room for the life we were too afraid to choose.